Part 1. The Cold Reality. Opening. Imagine this for a moment. The road is empty. Snow wipes away the edges of the world. The wind rises, not as noise, but as pressure pulling heat from everything it touches as daylight fades into a deep, unnatural blue. Now imagine you are a traveller from another time. Perhaps it is the Great Blizzard of 1978. Along Route 128, cars sit frozen in place, engines silent, highways transformed into graveyards of steel and snow, where survival depended on judgment, not horsepower. Or perhaps it's a modern Tuesday, a sudden mechanical failure, a dead engine, no signal, and the quiet realization that help is far away as the sun slips below the horizon. At 25 degrees Fahrenheit, the cold has no patience. It exposes mistakes almost instantly. Your car, once a symbol of freedom and safety, turns against you. Steel and glass become a massive heat sink, draining warmth from your body minute by minute. In the growing silence, your breath fills the cabin with moisture, and the comfort you took for granted disappears faster than you ever imagined. Most people believe survival is simple. Run the engine, turn on the heater, let technology handle the problem. But history and science tell a far more dangerous story. Those instincts idling, sealing the cabin, trusting machines, have killed more people than the cold itself. Survival is not about fighting the elements harder, it's about understanding them. Tonight, on Historia Prime, we are not talking about camping tricks or extreme adventures. We are breaking down a proven, low-risk system to survive a freezing night inside your car, without idling, without heaters, and without burning a single drop of fuel. A system built on physics, ancient textile wisdom, and the controlled power of the human body itself. Because when the engine stops and the temperature falls, survival doesn't belong to technology. It belongs to knowledge. And once the sun goes down, the frozen unknown begins. So let's step inside and learn how to make it through the night. Part 2. The idling trap and the silent killer. Before we build warmth, we have to unlearn something dangerous. For generations, drivers were taught a simple ritual. Start the engine, let it idle, let it warm up. And once upon a time, that advice was correct. If you were driving before 1980, your car relied on a carburetor. In cold weather, it couldn't balance air and fuel properly. Without idling, the engine would sputter, stall, and leave you stranded in the road. But that world is gone. Modern vehicles run on electronic fuel injection. Sensors constantly adjust the fuel mixture in real time. Your engine no longer needs long warm-ups to survive the cold. Yet the ritual remains, and in a survival situation, that habit becomes a trap. Here's why. In extreme cold, when you let a modern engine idle, the computer dumps extra fuel into the cylinders to keep the engine running. That fuel doesn't just burn. It acts like a solvent, washing the protective oil off your cylinder walls and pistons. Metal begins rubbing directly against metal. The damage is slow, invisible, and irreversible. Every minute of idling quietly strips years from your engine's life. But mechanical damage is the least dangerous consequence. The real threat is something you cannot see, smell, or feel coming. Carbon monoxide, the silent killer. In a blizzard, snow drifts do not behave like gentle powder. They pack, they seal, and they bury. Snow can block a tailpipe without you noticing, especially at night. When that happens, exhaust has nowhere to go. Carbon monoxide floods back into the cabin, silently replacing oxygen. And it works fast. In the wrong conditions, lethal concentrations can build in less than a minute. In 2017, 4 people in Montreal died doing exactly what most people believe is safe. Sitting inside a running car, surrounded by snow, trusting the engine to protect them. They never woke up. This is the brutal truth of cold weather survival. Survival is not about comfort. It is not about doing what feels reassuring. It is about reducing your exposure to catastrophic failure, mechanical, environmental, and biological. That is why, on Historia Prime, the first rule is absolute. No idling. Once the engine stops, the real survival strategy begins. Part 3. The fabric of survival, cotton versus wool. In the history of exploration, survival has often come down to one deceptively simple question. What touches your skin? Among woodsmen, polar travelers, and winter survivors, there is an old saying that sounds exaggerated until you understand the science behind it. Cotton kills. Cotton feels comfortable, familiar, safe. But in the cold, it becomes a liability. Cotton fibers are hollow and they love moisture. When you sweat, and you will sweat even in freezing temperatures, cotton absorbs that moisture and refuses to let it go. It holds dampness tight against your skin like a sponge. The danger appears the moment your activity slows. As your body temperature drops, that wet cotton turns into an icy shroud. Heat drains rapidly, shivering begins, and once that deep chill sets in, reversing it becomes incredibly difficult, sometimes impossible, without an external heat source. This is not a theory. It is a pattern repeated across centuries of failed expeditions. Now contrast that with a material so valuable in the Middle Ages that exporting it from Spain carried the death penalty. Merino wool. This was not superstition, it was biology. Wool is a masterpiece of natural engineering. Each fiber is not straight, but crimped, twisted into a three-dimensional wave. That structure creates millions of microscopic air pockets, trapping warmth directly against your body. Air, when held still, is insulation, and wool holds it better than almost any modern synthetic. But wool's true advantage goes deeper. When wool absorbs moisture, it does something extraordinary. Through a chemical process known as the heat absorption, it releases heat as it takes in water vapor. In simple terms, wool gets warmer when it gets damp. A kilogram of dry wool transitioning to moist can generate heat comparable to an electric blanket running for hours. This is why shepherds, soldiers, and explorers trusted wool long before laboratories could explain why it worked. And this knowledge translates directly to survival inside a frozen car. A wool base layer is not optional, it is foundational. It regulates moisture, preserves heat, and continues working even when conditions are less than ideal. The same logic applies to your head. It is one of the body's primary heat loss points, more radiator than helmet. A proper wool or thermally lined beanie becomes your thermostat. Loosen it to vent moisture, seal it down to conserve heat when the cold intensifies. This is the difference between discomfort and danger. Survival is not about piling on layers, it is about choosing the right ones. And in the cold, nothing beats a material designed by evolution to survive wind, snow, and long nights without fire. Because when the temperature drops and moisture creeps in, the fabric touching your skin can decide whether the night is merely uncomfortable or whether it becomes your last. Part 4. Fueling the human furnace. If your car has become a frozen metal shell, then understand this clearly. Your body is now the only furnace you have left. Every heartbeat, every breath, every shiver is powered by energy. And in the cold, that energy burns fast. To hold your core temperature near 98.6 degrees, your body demands fuel in quantities most people never imagine. In true cold weather survival, caloric needs can explode to 6 or even 7,000 calories a day. This is not excess, this is combustion. History learned this lesson the hard way. Long before energy bars and powdered supplements, explorers and indigenous peoples relied on a food designed for one purpose only: to keep the human furnace burning. Pemmican, a dense mixture of rendered animal fat, dried meat, and sometimes berries. It was not meant to taste good. It was meant to keep people alive when firewood was gone and the cold refused to ease. Fat, in survival terms, is not the enemy, it is salvation. Fat delivers more than double the energy of carbohydrates, 9 calories per gram versus 4. It burns slow and steady, producing long-lasting heat instead of short bursts. Foods like nut butter, coconut oil, ghee, or fatty meats become survival currency in a freezing car. They keep metabolism high through the night, even when you are lying still. But fuel alone is not enough. Water is just as critical. Dehydration thickens your blood and slows circulation. When blood flow weakens, heat stops reaching the extremities first. Fingers numb, toes lose feeling. Frost injury begins quietly, long before pain warns you. Staying hydrated keeps heat moving through your body, delivering warmth where it is needed most. And then there is a small tactic, simple, overlooked, and devastatingly effective. Before you settle in for the night, take the clothes you plan to wear tomorrow and stuff them into the bottom of your sleeping bag. As you sleep, they absorb your body heat. By morning, they are warm, flexible, and ready. Pulling on ice-cold clothing at dawn sends shock through your system, stealing precious heat and undoing hours of careful thermal balance. Survival is not about brute strength, it is about systems. You are feeding a furnace, not a stomach. You are managing circulation, not comfort. When fuel, hydration, and planning work together, your body becomes a reliable heat source, even inside a powerless, frozen vehicle. Because when the cold surrounds you and the engine stays silent, warmth does not come from machines. It comes from what you put inside yourself. Part 5. Engineering the microclimate. Insulation. At this stage, you must accept a hard truth. Your car is not shelter. It is a high-capacity heat sink. Steel, glass, and thin upholstery are designed to shed heat, not hold it. And the weakest point in that system is staring right at you, your windows. Standard automotive glass has almost no insulating value. Heat doesn't leak through it, it escapes freely. If you do nothing, your body will spend the entire night trying to warm the outside world. So survival demands a shift in thinking. You are no longer staying in a car, you are engineering a microclimate. The goal is not to heat the vehicle. The goal is to trap your heat exactly where your body needs it and prevent it from being stolen by cold surfaces. Start with the windows. Seasoned van lifers learned this lesson early. Reflective insulation like Reflectix sunshades does something critical. It doesn't just block cold air, it reflects radiant heat back toward its source. Your body emits heat constantly, and bare glass lets that energy disappear into the night. Once insulated, the windows stop acting like open doors and begin behaving like thermal mirrors. Next, look down. Cold does not only come from the sides, it rises silently through the thin metal floor beneath you. That metal is in direct contact with frozen ground and icy air, creating a constant conductive drain. If your body rests directly above it, heat flows away from you all night long. You must break that path. Closed-cell foam mats, thick rugs, spare clothing, even layered cardboard, anything that creates separation between your body and the car's chassis slows heat loss dramatically. This single step often makes the difference between restless shivering and stable warmth. And finally, shrink your world. Trying to heat an entire SUV or sedan is a losing battle. Instead, use a heavy wool blanket to create a partition, essentially a tent inside the car. By reducing the volume of air around you, your metabolic heat becomes far more effective. The smaller the space, the easier it is to keep warm. This is not comfort engineering, it is survival physics. You are trapping radiation, blocking conduction, and minimizing convection, all with simple materials and deliberate choices. When done correctly, the inside of your survival nest becomes noticeably warmer than the surrounding cabin, even with no external heat source at all. Because warmth does not come from space heaters or running engines, It comes from understanding how heat moves and learning how to stop it from leaving. Part 6. The sleeping system and the ISO standard. By now, everything comes down to one final system, the place where you will spend the longest, coldest hours of the night. Sleep is when people fail, not because they relax, but because they trust the wrong numbers. When choosing a sleeping bag, ignore the bold marketing labels. Words like winter rated or all season are designed to sell gear, not save lives. In cold weather survival, there is only one number that matters: the ISO 23537 standard. This standard exists for a reason. It separates comfort from survival. If the forecast calls for 25 degrees Fahrenheit and your sleeping bag lists a comfort rating of 25, you are already in trouble. Comfort assumes ideal conditions, dry clothing, and a rested body. In a car, after hours of cold stress, those conditions do not exist. What you want instead is margin, a lower limit or extreme rating that gives you at least a 15 to 20 degree buffer. That buffer is not luxury, it is insurance. Inside the bag, another danger hides in plain sight: air gaps. Loose space inside a sleeping system allows cold pockets to form. Warm air rises, escapes and collapses, forcing your body to reheat the same volume again and again. Over time, this drains energy and accelerates heat loss. A proper system should wrap close, creating a sealed thermal envelope that works with your body, not against it. And then there is a technique that looks primitive but works with ruthless efficiency. If you can safely boil water outside the vehicle, fill a sturdy bottle and wrap it in cloth. Place it at the foot of your sleeping bag. This simple heat source releases warmth slowly through the night, warming blood as it passes through the femoral arteries and circulates back toward your core. No flames, no fumes, no moving parts. Just controlled heat delivered exactly where the body can use it. This is the difference between enduring the night and losing ground hour by hour. A sleeping system is not bedding, it is life support. When chosen correctly and sealed properly, it allows your metabolism to stabilize, your shivering to slow, and your body to do what it does best: survive. Because in the deepest cold, the night does not test your strength. It tests your preparation. Part 7. The ventilation paradox. This is the moment where instinct betrays most people. As the temperature drops and the cabin grows quiet, every impulse tells you to seal the car completely. Close every window, trap every bit of warmth, lock the cold outside. Do not do this, because you are not just a heat source, you are a moisture factory. With every breath, your body releases water vapor. Hour after hour, that vapor accumulates, nearly half a liter over the course of a single night. In a sealed vehicle, that moisture has nowhere to go. It drifts until it meets cold glass and metal, where it condenses into liquid water or freezes into frost along the inside of your windows. This is where danger quietly takes hold. Dampness strips heat faster than cold air ever could. Wet insulation collapses. Bedding loses its loft. Clothing that once kept you warm becomes a thermal liability. This is how people slip into damp-chill hypothermia, slowly, silently, without realizing they are losing the fight. The solution feels wrong, but it works. You must crack a window, just an inch. That small opening allows moist air to escape while fresh, dry air enters. And here is the paradox that saves lives. Dry, cold air is far easier to stay warm in than damp air trapped inside a metal box. Dry insulation works. Dry wool works. A dry sleeping system preserves heat instead of stealing it. Yes, you will feel a trace of cold entering, but what you are preventing is far worse. Ventilation keeps your microclimate stable. It protects your insulation. It stops condensation before it becomes a problem you cannot reverse. This single decision often marks the line between a controlled night and a slow collapse into exhaustion and cold. Survival is rarely intuitive. Sometimes the safest move is the one that feels like a mistake, and in the frozen silence of a car at night, letting a little cold in is exactly what keeps the warmth alive. Part 8. Strategic Movement. Conclusion. The night is over. The sky lightens. The cold loosens its grip, and the sun rises over a car that, just hours ago, felt more like a coffin than a shelter. You step outside, tired, stiff, but alive, and that matters. Because survival was never just about equipment. It was always about judgment. History makes this painfully clear. In 1994, during a brutal blizzard, a man chose to stay inside his camper. He had shelter. He had walls. What he didn't have was the right decision. He died of starvation, only a short walk from a fully stocked lodge. 12 years later, in 2006, James Kim faced a different choice. He left the safety of his vehicle to search for help. His footprints in the snow, fragile, fading, became the very trail that rescuers followed back to his wife and children, saving their lives. These stories are not contradictions, they are lessons. There is no universal rule in survival. Sometimes, staying put and signaling for help is the smartest move you can make. Other times, strategic movement toward warmth, shelter, or visibility is the only path forward. The key is not bravery or fear, but context. Weather, terrain, distance, time, and above all, understanding. We look back at history to explorers who trusted wool over cotton, to motorists who survived blizzards without engines, to the quiet science of the human body. Not to romanticize the past, but to remember something essential. We are not helpless. Knowledge is the ultimate fuel. It weighs nothing, it never freezes, and it is the only thing that can truly turn a powerless metal shell into a functioning life support system. So before your next journey, ask yourself, how will you prepare? What is the one item or the one piece of knowledge you will never leave behind in winter? If what you learned today could save a life, share it with someone who might need it, and subscribe to Historia Prime to keep this practical wisdom alive. Stay warm, stay smart, and we'll see you in the next one.